Welcome back, everyone. It's good to have you here. So today I wanted to go over some camera workflow techniques that have really helped to improve my photography. And by workflow, I just mean the order of operations, or how you actually control your camera when you're out shooting in the field. And one thing I always find when teaching people photography is that most people just set up their shot in a random order every time, and then they select their settings in a random order. And by doing so, their brain doesn't really have this final outcome that it's looking for, so it can feel very chaotic while out capturing images. And what I've found is that if you feel stressed or you feel like you're in a chaotic situation when you're shooting really good light, there's no way that you're going to select the best compositions or get the best photos out of it, because instead of working on the things like composition and light, you're going to be wondering if you're selecting the best camera settings or wondering why your camera's not working in the way that it should. So if you guys want to actually learn and see this in reality or in the field, I have many other videos on this, but this video I'm just going to give you a few simple techniques on how you can set up your own camera and how you can go through the shooting process that will really help you to improve your landscape photography. So the number one thing that I always do and I always teach people is that when you set up your camera, you should always have everything, if you can, with your camera make and model on your right hand. So what I like to have is that all the buttons and all the controls that I need for shooting are on my right hand, and then my left hand just controls the knob for the tripod. So no matter what, I'm holding the camera with my right hand, and then the tripod adjustment I'm using to dial in composition with my left hand. And then I'm never wondering about switching hands back and forth while I'm constantly trying to set up different compositions for images. It's also just really nice for shooting when all your buttons are on your right hand, if you can place them there. I know some lower level cameras don't have that option, but if you can get away with that option, it is absolutely worth it to be able to do it. So the second thing that I do when I set up my camera that can be very helpful is to have every single button that's controlled by your right hand, or whatever your shooting technique is, have every single button just do one specific thing. So when I used to teach workshops, one of the things I'd see all the time is that people would let their camera buttons dictate like 2 or 3 different options. So one of the main ones is like the shutter button comes set up on most cameras that it also focuses. So camera has to guess if you want the shutter button to focus or take the shot. And I have a back button focus video that shows my entire focusing technique and why it's so bad to have your shutter button and your focus button on the same thing, because when your camera's guessing what one button is supposed to do, it might have 2 or 3 options for that. It's not always going to make the next right guess. So if you have every single button that you actually need do one specific thing and no more, then you're going to get a lot better images, because your camera's not going to be guessing what you want that button to do. So you can just set that up in your menu settings. But what I like to do is I like to have I shoot in aperture priority mode, and you guys can see my other videos on why, but I like to have the finger button on my front finger. It can reach the shutter release, and that's all it does is take the image. And then it can also reach the dial, which changes the f-stop value. Then on my back button, I have my thumb, and my thumb controls the zoom in or out of the digital zoom, so I can see where I'm focusing. And then it can also control the EV, or exposure compensation. Then I also have another button up on the top which controls ISO, or ISO. So everything is on my right hand, and by controlling all those, I can control everything that I need for the camera. And then I have a few other quick selection menu buttons that go directly to one specific setting, such as Kelvin white balance, or any other setting that I need to change for every single shot. So just a short workflow setup where you take all your buttons and you put them at very thought out places, meaning you're thinking through, well, when I'm shooting, what would make it easier for me to capture photos? Where do I want this button to exist? And do I really need a function at that button? So if you look at all your buttons on your right hand or anywhere on your camera, I always want them to be things that I need to access on a regular basis, because if there are things that I don't need to change, say you're taking shots of landscapes and you have your video settings on one of the buttons on your right hand where you're trying to shoot, that's just not an efficient placement of that button, because you might use video once every month or something. So you don't want it placed up there with things that you're using for every single shot. So everything should have its place as far as the buttons that control your exposure, your f-stop, your ISO, everything else that's used to capture every single image, and all of those things should be controlled by one button that does one specific thing only. And I think if everybody just does that, that makes so much of an improvement to the clarity of mind that you'll have while shooting, that you'll be amazed at how much more enjoyable it can be to take photos, and how much more time you have to actually concentrate on composition. And where this really comes into play is when the light's really good, and you need to be dialed in completely to your composition and to the light moving in the scene. And if you take even a fraction of a second to wonder why one of the buttons is doing something, then you're just gonna miss the shot and it's not gonna work out well. So little things like that over long periods of time of shooting can really produce better image quality. I wanted to give you guys a quick heads up. Right now, if you join my email list, I have a 10-day free trial, which gives you unlimited access to all of my photography courses. Now, these courses teach every single technique that I use as a full-time wilderness photographer. So you'll learn camera technique, you'll learn photo editing, photo organization, composition, how to find shots in the field. You'll be able to access and watch dozens of my expeditions out into the wilderness where I take these photos and teach you how to create them from start to finish. I designed this school to be the perfect learning experience, something that I wish would have existed when I started wilderness photography, landscape photography, and outdoor photography 10 years ago. So if you'd like to join my email list, you'll get this 10-day free trial. You'll also get a bunch of other good stuff, including access to my PDF library, which includes all of my photography guides, which you can take out in the field to shoot with you. Check out the link down below this video to join and sign up. You can cancel anytime. I'll never hold your email address hostage. I want to provide you with the best learning experience possible. Now let's get back to the video. Another thing that helps me out a lot, along with that first one, is to have a step-by-step shooting routine. And by shooting routine, I mean when you set up to take a shot. Let's say you first are walking around with your camera. I always walk around to find compositions with my camera when it's not on a tripod. I'll just handheld it, walk around, find a few compositions. And after I do that, I'll select my favorite, and then I'll set my tripod up. But when you do so, if you have a step-by-step process, almost like a checklist of how you go setting up your camera, how you go about finding your composition, and then the order which you select your camera settings, and then you write these out, and then you force yourself to do it every time you shoot. Now, at first, you'll be like, man, it feels weird to follow a checklist for selecting the best f-stop, the best exposure, the best focal point, and everything else. But once you do it for a few weeks, you can just come out in the woods wherever. You don't have to be out on a really nice shoot. And you can just practice it until it ingrains into your muscle memory. And from there, once you go out and shoot, you'll feel like a master of the camera technique, because instead of wondering what setting you should select next or what you should be doing, it'll kind of just flow out of your mind into your hand. And then the hand almost becomes the same thing as the camera, and you don't even notice that you have a camera, and then you can really concentrate on the composition and the scene. So I have these designed that I've optimized over time, and all the students in my online landscape photography school are taught this with my introductory camera technique course. So what I like to do is I like to level them up through the step-by-step checklist of selecting each setting. So they have this whole checklist that they can go through, and then I teach them specifically in depth each step on that checklist. So if you have a checklist of your entire camera technique and you write it out, and then you're looking through that checklist and you're not an expert at each one of those steps, then you can really say, well, I need to think through this step more specifically and become better at it. And you can see all the weak points in your photography process. And the same thing can go for photo editing. So one of the big objections to this that I often hear is that, well, that's too much structure, you won't be creative. Well, if you think about it, creativity is creating things that are new, that do not exist yet. When you're setting up your camera and you're going through all the steps of dialing your camera settings, people have done this since cameras existed. So it's not creative. The goal is to free up mental space so you can capture images that are creative by concentrating on your compositions and making them better. So by having step-by-step processes for things that aren't creative will actually make you more creative and create better images. So hopefully those tips helped you guys out. They are things that I use every single time I shoot, and I'm always trying to optimize those processes and make them better so I can spend more time thinking about the creative stuff and less time worrying about the tools that I'm actually using. Leave me a comment below with a question you may have had. I'll be answering them in future Q&A sessions. Also, leaving me a like or hitting the subscribe button to follow my channel is a huge help. I have a 10-day free trial which gives you unlimited access to all of the courses that I have that teach every single skill set about landscape and outdoor photography. These are skills that I've tuned, honed, and designed over the last 10 years as a full-time wilderness photographer. So if you'd like to get free access, test out all the courses, learn composition, learn camera technique, photo editing, organization, everything else that goes into the complete creation of wilderness and landscape photography images, check out the link below this video. Get signed up. No strings attached, no credit card required. I just want to give you guys access to understand everything that I know about landscape and outdoor photography. So thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.